It's time for a Big Blue Kickoff Live.
Nobody can ever tell you that you couldn't do it, because you did.
On Giants.com.
You know what I saw? New York Giant pride.
And the Giants mobile app.
17-14 is the final. One touchdown, we are world champions. Believe it, and it will happen.
Part of the Giants Podcast Network.
Let's go out there like a bunch of crazy dogs.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to, what is today? Tuesday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live, presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the Giants, coming you from the Giants Podcast Studio, presented by Hackensack Meridian Health. Keep getting better. All right, we're going to continue our opponent preview series today. We're going to talk to Fernando Ramirez, who covers the Chargers. We'll have him in just a little bit. We're also going to take a bunch of your calls at 201-939-4513. A couple basketball trades coming down here with the draft coming up in a day. We got to get Pearson, I want you back in here at the end of the show so we can talk to you about the holiday trade, all right? I want to get you involved. Yes. So, well, 90 games. Unfortunately. And, of course, Fernando Ramirez covers the Chargers for the Sporting Tribune. So
he could weigh in too on that if he'd like.
I suppose he can. Though I'm not sure. I'm not sure he does a lot of work on the Trailblazers. I'm not sure if that.
They're in the West Coast vicinity.
I'm not sure if that's covered in the Southern California, Las Vegas, and Hawaii area. But it's we could talk to him about
We're
that.
Extending the
and
horizons
a whole lot more.
today,
Absolutely. All right. So Lance, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. Yeah, absolutely.
Right, good. Me too. All right. So let's get right to it. Let's bring in Fernando Ramirez. He covers the Chargers with a variety of other teams for the Sporting Tribune. Fernando, you got John Schmeelk and Lance Medow here in East Rutherford in the Giants practice facility. How you doing today?
Good. How are you guys doing? Thank you guys so much for having me on.
We're doing fantastic, man. So give me, before we head into what happened in the offseason, give me a feel for why and how the Harbaugh Chargers were different than the pre-Harbaugh Chargers.
How much time do you guys have? Honestly, it was structure. I mean, he brought structure in. And also GM Joe Ortiz, they brought a structure in that the Chargers didn't have before. Multiple players told us that during the Brandon Staley era, there was times where he was blaming offensive players and saying, you guys aren't doing your job. But then you turn around and the offense was the thing that was clicking. The defense was what was the mess. They were always in the bottom half or in the bottom end of defensive stats, touchdowns, red zone percentage. So it was one of those things where I'm the young genius and everybody else is wrong. So there was just a lot of things there that just didn't go well for the Chargers. And here Jim Harbaugh comes in here and he says, look, this is what we're going to do. He brings in veterans at every position who are going to be leaders and step up to be leaders. And he really brought a sense of structure, which the Chargers desperately have needed. Probably since the Anthony Lynn era, they haven't had that kind of structure. So that's essentially what he brought.
Well, and probably the least surprising development, Fernando, I would say, is him bringing an emphasis back to the run game, because, I mean, that has essentially been his MO, whether it's Michigan, the San Francisco 49ers, Stanford. And I want to start there as opposed to go in the direction of Herbert, because I still think that is going to be the identity of their scheme this season, but the personnel is changing. No J.K. Dobbins, no Gus Edwards. They bring in Najee Harris from the Steelers and Omarion Hampton through the draft. How do you see it all, the style of running perhaps changing with some new personnel this year?
Well, and the one thing that obviously I think the big key is Mekhi Becton being brought in, and
sure.
and the thing is though is that Mekhi is obviously physical. That's a lot of mass on that right side between he and Joe Walt, and obviously Rashawn Slater at the left tackle. Their guard and center are still kind of an issue for them, but going to the run game, I mean that's what they tried to do last year, and J.K. even had a good start to the season until he got injured. He was at about 800 yards. He had multiple touchdowns. He had been big for the Chargers. Then he gets hurt against the Ravens, and they the running game kind of falls off. And in the playoff game, you go back and look at the stats, and they didn't even run the football at all. They basically depended on Justin Herbert and Ladd McConkey to get him out of it, but it was just too far gone at that point. But now you get two guys that are dependable, that are reliable. And I'm not saying Gus Edwards and J.K. weren't, but they both got injured. They both missed multiple weeks. Najee Harris hasn't missed a game, I believe, or maybe only one. And then Omarion Hampton's been a big part of North Carolina's offense. And Joe Ortiz said, look, when it comes to Omarion, we saw that there was no drop-off. If anything, he got better once Drake May left. He was able to carry that offense. So they were very impressed with him. At that point, they're impressed by his pass blocking and him being able to make catches out of the backfield. And then Najee, obviously, is a big thumper who he even came out and said, look, in Pittsburgh, we didn't have an offensive structure when it came to the run game. So it was no surprise he wanted to come to the Chargers, who, like you guys said, they're going to be heavy emphasis on the run, which obviously in turn is going to open up the play action for Justin Herbert. I mean, last year he only threw 3 interceptions during the season. So if the Chargers upgrading their running back and then upgrading part of their offensive line, that could definitely help that play action and Herbert and the passing offense have a little bit of weight lifted off of their shoulders.
Well, Fernando, you hit on the offensive line, so I'm going to jump to the weapons. Really nice rookie season for Ladd McConkey. Showed really good player, really good value as a second-round pick. Quentin Johnston took a little bit of a jump. He had a much better second year than he did a first. You know, Mike Williams comes back. I'm not sure how much he has left in the tank. They draft Trey Harris. How do you analyze this group of wide receivers? I feel like maybe they could have done a little bit more this offseason to add a little bit of more firepower to the group. How do you think they're viewing this group internally, really relying on a bunch of young guys that have been drafted in the last 2 or 3 years to kind of carry this group?
Well, that's the thing, too, is that, I mean, everybody, obviously, as soon as Keenan Allen didn't get re-signed by the Bears, everybody's like, well, could he be going to the Chargers? And obviously Jim and Joe have been asked that multiple times, but it just doesn't look like that's going to be happening. I mean, I've heard the price tag is a little too heavy, and that's the thing. They're willing to invest in everything else but the receivers. If you guys notice, and even go back to his track record with San Francisco, I mean, they are willing. They know that if they have a great run game, they just need guys who can make plays. And I mean, Ladd McConkey kind of fell into their lap last year, and I'm not saying that obviously that they did their homework and they knew that he was going to be a really good receiver, and now they're hoping that Trey Harris is the same guy, and that way you have them locked in at cheap contracts for the next 4 years. And then they got Keandre Lambert-Smith out of Auburn, who they feel like he's a burner, and he's going to be a guy that obviously is going to make some noise, but I think what they're going to do is Ladd is going to be on the field almost on every play. I think everybody else is going to be a situational, rotational piece. I think Trey is going to, if he works the way we saw a little bit during OTAs, I feel like he may be a guy that could solidify himself as, oh, yeah, he should be on the field every single time. But everybody else is going to be kind of a rotational piece. And they also brought in Tyler Conklin, tight end, and then Oronde Gadsden from Syracuse. That kid looks like a steal already for the Chargers, and I know they're just in T-shirts, but he had a crazy wheel route where the safety thought he bid, thinking he was going to go out inside. He goes outside, turns around, turns upfield, and Herbert found him for a 25-yard gain. So he looks like he could be a playmaker for them. But that's what Jim Harbaugh's MO is. He's gonna low risk, high reward. He's going to bring in guys that are cheap, and I'm sure, obviously, that more fans obviously were clamoring. They wanted Keenan Allen back. They wanted them to spend. They wanted DK Metcalf. But then you see that contract. I did not think Jim Harbaugh was going to pay $30 million for a receiver. So I wasn't surprised when they didn't go get DK. I didn't think he was going to pay $25 million for a 33, 34-year-old Devontae or 32-year-old Devontae Adams. It's not his MO. They're going to draft young guys, and they're going to coach them up, and hopefully they step up the way Ladd McConkey did. But obviously Jim is trying to say, hey, not everybody's Ladd McConkey and Joe Alt. We can't expect these draft picks to play up to that level. We hope, and we'll coach them to do that, but we can't have those high expectations for every single time for rookies.
But to your point, I think the draft class certainly met, if not exceeded, expectations last season. And on paper, it looks like they have a nice youth movement that they're going to add to the mix. I want to stay on the receiving front because, Fernando, I think you do bring up a good point about Jim Harbaugh's MO. I think back to San Francisco, Vernon Davis was a key piece of their offense as opposed to the wide receivers, even though they did have a Michael Crabtree. I'm looking at the numbers from last season. McConkey and Johnston accounted for 15 of the 23 touchdown passes for Herbert. How much more, I guess, diversity do you see in their passing attack this season with the arrival of Gatson, now that it's year 2 of the offense, even though, obviously, they still lean on the run game?
Well, the thing is, there was times where the Chargers offense stalled out in the red zone because they didn't have it was double lad and then just let everybody else kind of go one-on-one. Well, now with Mike Williams, you're going to be able to throw the ball up, and I think Mike is going to be more of a red zone target. Obviously, on deep plays, they're gonna try and go to him, but I think Mike is going to be a red zone target. The back shoulder with Trey Harris, I think, is going to be something to look out for. Kind of that Aaron Rodgers, Devontae Adams, and I'm not comparing either 4 of those players or the 2 from LA to those 2, but that back shoulder, it seems that like Trey Harris loves to do that. So I think the thing is they brought in, like you said, a diversity, different receivers that do a lot of different things, and I think that's what they're going to do. They're going to spread the ball around also, and obviously they're going to depend on the running backs to make catches out of the backfield. But I think they've completely revamped this receiving core, the tight end group, and even the running back group. I mean, literally, they got guys who don't usually miss games due to injuries. So that's the thing. Harbaugh wants them available, ready to go, and that's kind of what they got out of all these guys. But they're gonna be able to hit you from many different ways, especially with the receiving core being improved and the tight end and just every positional group has been upgraded, and I feel like that's what Jim and Joe try to do. And, I mean, they looked at that Houston game multiple times. They watched that Tampa Bay game multiple times, and they watched that Baltimore game, and they saw that in all 3 games their offense got dominated, and they wanted to make changes to improve this offense. Because how can you have – and I can't remember the way Jim said it because – I can't remember all the crazy things he says, but he basically said, how can we have a captain well, I'm just going to put it to you like this. How can we have a guy like Herbert and not surround him with weapons all around? So that was basically the way he put it, that they need to get better, and they did improve on paper right now in all positional pass-catching groups of the offense.
Before we jump over to the defense, Fernando, I want to touch on Justin Herbert with you. I thought he probably had the best year of his career last year. His average depth of target was more than a yard higher than it had been in any other year. And, he's a guy, despite all the physical tools, I feel like you kind of have to push him to be more aggressive, take more chances. And it looked to me, at least, I didn't watch every snap the way you did, that he was more willing to get the ball down the field and play a little bit looser last year. Was that your sense, and what other impact do you think the new offense in Harbaugh had on Herbert?
Well, I think Herbert, it took him a little bit because we have to remember, too, he had that foot injury.
Yeah.
So he missed all of training camp, basically. So it cost him a little bit to kind of get in there because then he comes in, he plays okay against the Raiders. They played okay against Carolina. In Carolina, he gets hurt. And then against the Steelers and the Chiefs, he didn't play well. Because obviously he was on one foot. And then they come back out of the bye week, and he plays really well. So I think there was an adjustment period, but I completely agree with you. The only thing is that you see the kind of season he had, and then you really look at the weapons, and you're kind of like, wow, now what's he going to do when he has a plethora of weapons? Because that sophomore year, there was no sophomore slump with him. I think he had 41 touchdowns. Only like 10 or 11 interceptions, and he had over almost 5,000 yards. So with Herbert, it's just going to be about, can he get comfortable with these guys? Can he make it through all of training camp without having to miss any time? And if he does, I feel like he's going to be really in sync, but they're going to really need everybody to be healthy throughout training camp because he has a bunch of new – the only returning receivers are Quentin and Ladd. Obviously, he has some rapport with Mike, but he had a rapport with Mike Williams before the torn ACL. So now they're going to have to kind of get back on the same page. He's going to have to get on the same page with the running backs, with the tight ends. So this training camp is going to be very crucial. But I really think that Herbert could be in line for his best season, especially like you guys said. People didn't think he was going to throw down the field last year, and that he did more than he has in years past. So I definitely think that if they all start clicking, this offense could be a lot better, because Greg Roman did catch a lot of flack last year. But, I mean, in the same time, you have to think, well, there was a lot of variables that obviously didn't come together because of the missed time, the running backs getting hurt. A lot of crazy stuff just happened last year in year one. But this year there should be much more cohesion between the offense and the quarterback and the pass catchers.
Yeah, a little bit more stability as well. And that brings me to the defensive side, because we talked about the two elements in play, Fernando, last season off the top of the conversation, the run game on offense and the dramatic improvement on defense. We're talking about the number one scoring defense in the NFL. They gave up just under 18 points a game. How much was that what Jesse Minter brought to the table as the new defensive coordinator? And how much was that how they utilized the personnel in your mind compared to what we saw under Brandon Staley?
Well, that was the thing. It was the way that he was able to. It was a scheme, obviously, but it was the personnel. They're kind of running sometimes some of the similar stuff that Brandon used to do, but it's just with here you're not asking guys to do too much. And even Derwin James, I mean, he was a good soldier. He wouldn't say anything, but you kind of know. He said it night and day, the difference between Jesse Minter and Brandon Staley's scheme. And with Brandon Staley, he was asking Derwin to do too much. Here, you're depending on a lot of other people. I mean, the first half of the season before his injury, Christian Fulton was playing really well in this scheme. Other guys were really shining in this scheme, and you guys saw, obviously, Poona Ford signed a big deal with the Rams in the offseason, and Teair Tart is a guy that not a lot of people knew about. The Dolphins cut him halfway through camp, or at the end of camp, and about a week or two before camp, and the Chargers brought him in. And I asked one of my buddies that covers the Dolphins, I said, hey, what's the deal on Tart? He's like, look, if he has a coach that can get him going and that can motivate him and coach him up, he's going to be a heck of a player. And that's what he was for the Chargers last year. So they really depended on all that. Khalil Mack, obviously, and Joey Bosa and Tuli Tuipulotu. I mean, they really put guys in spots to succeed. So that was really what kind of changed. They weren't so dependent on Derwin doing everything. This was more about, hey, as a team, and then the trade that they made for Elijah,
well, they added Elijah Molden. Is that who you're referring to, the cornerback?
Yeah, Elijah Molden. Thank you. Yeah, Elijah Molden. That was a couple of days before the season started. They made that trade, so that was just. Those were just good moves that they made late in training camp. They brought them in and guys that flourished. So, again, the way that they did everything last offseason was low risk, high reward. It seems like that's what they did. That's what they're doing now, especially bringing in guys like Deshaun Hand, Naquan Jones to kind of replace what Poona Ford did. So that's kind of the style that they're doing. Same thing that they're doing with the offense, they're kind of doing with the defense as well.
Yeah, not a lot of big names on defense, Fernando. When you look at the depth chart, there's not a lot of, besides Derwin James, there's no first-round picks there except for Khalil Mack, who obviously got drafted in the first round forever ago. Is there enough, raw pass rush talent here? Joey Bosa departed. Now, he didn't play a ton last year with the injury anyway. But they have Bud Dupree. They have Khalil Mack. Is there enough raw pass rushing talent up front here for this defense to be consistent against the pass?
That's been my two biggest question marks on the offense is the guard and the left guard and the center. On defense, it is the pass rush, just because you're asking a lot of a 34-year-old Khalil Mack, 33-year-old man. He'd kill me if I got his age wrong. But
you don't want him mad at you.
You're asking a lot of a veteran Khalil Mack to shoulder this load, and they drafted Kyle Kennard, who was the SEC Defensive Player of the Year last year. They really like him. I hadn't seen him until a couple of days ago at the facility. That dude he's huge. He looks like he was chiseled. It's just crazy how big this dude is, and they're kind of going to depend on him. They're going to depend on Tuipulotu, like I mentioned, at a USC. He's going into his third year. Last year, he had a stretch, in between, during 8 games in the season where he had almost 8.5. I think he had 8 or 8.5 sacks. And then at the beginning of the season, it was kind of rough. And then at the end of the season, it was kind of rough for him. But that's the in-between is what the Chargers are going to try and hone on and see if he can take that next step here. Now, his edge defending isn't as good as what Joey was, but that's something that he wanted to work on this offseason. But they're gonna ask a lot of guys to do a lot of different stuff because, Khalil Mack, Kyle Kennard, Thule, and then you have a veteran in Bud Dupree, but then you kind of have to find another guy to be in there. So one of the guys last year that a lot of people liked was Tremont Morris Brash. He played well during preseason, so maybe that's kind of a guy to keep an eye out for. But yeah, that's my biggest question mark. Are they going to be able to get after the quarterback with the front seven? And that's kind of the issue there with the Chargers defense. But hey, I had a lot of questions going into last year, and they ended up producing, like you said, the number 1 scoring defense. So, but yeah, edge rusher is the biggest question mark for me on this defense.
Well, perhaps an area that they can make up for that, and correct me if I'm wrong based on your perspective, Fernando, I thought the play of the middle of the defense last season probably helped define the group. Specifically, Deion Henley had a breakout campaign, who was their 3rd-round pick in 2023, and I think the combination of him and Denzel Perryman pretty much provided at least some structure in the middle to help the guys up front and some of the young guys on the back end. How much do you think they're going to lean on that twosome again, or even Junior Colson, who you could throw in the mix as well?
Yeah, no, Deion last year, I can't remember what game he tore his labrum in, but yeah, he played the whole season with a big old brace, and he said it took me time to adjust to using that brace, but now no brace, he's ready to go. Guys have been saying all pro, they feel like he's going to have a huge season for them, and it's crazy because Deion wasn't even used during he was a rookie during Brandon Staley's final year. And he told me last year, he was like, Fernando, he would tell me, don't worry, we have a plan for you. We're going to get you in there. We have confidence in you. He's like, I barely even saw the field. He's like, I was even surprised. Some of my coaches were even surprised that I wasn't seeing the field in this defense. So he really flourished last year, and he showed that he potentially could be a steal in the draft class that he came out in. But Deion's a guy that they're really hoping can take that next step this year, and he's even working out with the edge rushers. And I asked him, why are you doing that? He's like, I want to get better when I blitz, and I want to be able to find the holes and find areas so that I can take advantage of it and help the defense out. Last year, he had a key play against the Cincinnati Bengals where he did blitz. And it was late in the game. I think there was only a minute left in the game. It was 3rd and 5. Burrow had T. Higgins wide open, and Deion was able to come in and grab him and take him to the ground, and it was incomplete. They punted it. The Chargers turn around and win the game on a J.K. Dobbins run. But those are kind of the things that they're hoping that he's going to do. Now, you mentioned Denzel Perryman. He's a veteran, so he provided help in the run defense last year, which they loved. He got hurt in that Baltimore Ravens game or the Cincinnati game. I can't remember which one. He missed a couple of weeks, which was rough for them, but they're hoping that he's able to provide that punch. But you mentioned Junior Colson. They're really depending that he can turn it around. Last year he missed time. He had his appendix taken out right before the season started. As somebody who had his appendix taken out when he was a kid, I know how rough that is. So yeah, he missed a lot of training camp. He was injured, and they kind of threw him in the fire to see how he could do. He had some rough spots, but they're really hoping that this year, especially with his familiarity with Junior Cole, with the defense and the scheme of Jesse Minter, they're hoping that he can take off. But they're really hopeful that because everybody talks about the 4 starters that they got in the draft last year, and Tarheeb Steele, Cam Hart, Joe Walt, Ladd McConkey. Well, the Chargers are hoping that he and Junior Colson and obviously their other pick, who was Justin Igboibi from Alabama, they're hoping that the 3rd and 4th round picks are guys that can contribute this year. Justin gained 20 pounds. Junior Colson's put on muscle. So they're hoping that those two guys join their classmates or their draft class and obviously help bring more intensity to the defense.
Final question for me, and then I think I'm sure Lance wants to hit the defensive backfield. Just overall, last year the Chargers made the playoffs, first year under Jim Harbaugh. You have to consider that to be a success. Really disappointing first-round playoff loss, 32-12. All sorts of issues trying to score. They had trouble protecting in that game, the quarterback. What's the expectation level out here? Is it just, all right, let's make the playoffs again, let's maybe win a round? Is there Super Bowl talk around the building? Fernando, obviously you have a very tough division. The Raiders bring in Pete Carroll. They bring in Geno Smith. We know what the Chiefs are. The Broncos have an excellent roster, so one of the toughest divisions in football. What's the general expectation level from the fan base and from the organization that you're sensing heading into year 2 of the Harbaugh era?
Well, fanatics are for a reason. They expect Super Bowl every single year. I mean, right now, even Titan fans are out here yelling at people for getting all fired up and saying that they're not going to make the playoffs. But, no, I think obviously the Chargers team, the mindset is we have to go out and win the Super Bowl. And obviously in Jim Harbaugh's second year, they made it to the Super Bowl. I think this is going to be a lot tougher, like you guys said. The AFC is just a slugfest. I mean, you have a bunch of older quarterbacks like Herbert, like Mahomes. Aaron Rodgers is now is obviously in it. But you have a lot of those older, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson. Then you have these new guys and Drake May, Bo Nix, and all these guys coming in. So it's going to be a slugfest. But I think the Chargers are just hoping to build off of what they did last year. I know Khalil Mack keeps on talking Super Bowl because, unfortunately, in Khalil Mack's career, he's never won a playoff game. So He's hopeful he can put his stamp on his first ballot Hall of Famer by winning a Super Bowl. He's like, I just want to win a Super Bowl. And every offseason in the last 2 years, we've had to speak to Khalil, and we're like, hey, are you coming back? I don't know. And then the last 3 seasons, he's ended up coming back. He said his wife even has gotten frustrated with it. She's like, why are you even contemplating this? You know you're going back. You want to win a Super Bowl. So, and the Charger players are really rallying around, hey, let's get K-Mac a Super Bowl before he retires. But obviously their thought process is they're taking it one game at a time. I think for them, a successful season would be winning a playoff game or 2. Justin Herbert really needs it because he really now, I mean, as the years pass, he's getting lower and lower in that quarterback ranking, and questions are being asked. And, what's funny is a lot of Charger fans I've noticed on Twitter are trying to compare Justin Herbert right now to Peyton Manning. Peyton Manning did not win his first playoff game until his 6th season. That's the year that Justin's going into. And I really feel like, I mean, the numbers are kind of very similar between Peyton and Herbert, but I think fans are really thirsty for a playoff win for him so that they can say, hey, look, we have the best quarterback. He's won a playoff game. But I just really think that fans are hopeful that they make the playoffs. I think the Chargers feel like they have a good enough team to go out there and compete with anybody. And I think this year they're gonna try and show more. Hey, last year, Joe Ortiz and Jim Harbaugh grabbed glue sticks. They grabbed popsicle sticks. They grabbed a bunch of stuff and try to put this roster together with limited money to almost no money. Now this year we had a lot more cap space. We drafted really well, and we brought in some of our own players. So they're feeling that this year could be the first year of really that Jim Harbaugh hard-nosed team. But yeah, I just think it's going to be a brutal conference just because of how talented. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if the same teams I know every year a team or two drops off and 2 new teams make the playoffs, but I wouldn't be surprised if we got all 7 teams making the playoffs just because of how good the conference is.
Yeah, there has been a lot of turnover in recent years, but who knows? It's possible that we could see some of the usual suspects in the mix. I want to piggyback off of your last comment before we wrap up. You had mentioned last year's philosophy was, okay, we'll build through the draft. This year we have a better feel for the team, so maybe we'll be a little bit more aggressive. even though they decided not to bring back Poona Ford, I thought adding Dante Jackson in the secondary from Pittsburgh should help solidify and balance out what is still a relatively young secondary. What has stood out to you at all about his impact? I know they don't put the pads on yet, so you can only judge so much from an X's and O's, but you put him with Derwin James, I think that's a lot of experience to complement the younger guys such as Hart and Still.
Yeah, no, Dante's had I think he's had 2 interceptions during OTAs. So, and I think he had a pop up. So he told us that he's more of instincts. He kind of reacts, and that's what the Chargers kind of want from their younger guys. Just react. Last year, Tarheeb reacted twice against Atlanta, and he had 2 really good interceptions, including a pick 6. So Cam Hart, in one of those, he reacted, turned around, and he laid out Chris Olave. So there's been moments where the Chargers want guys to just react, and that's what Dante is. Dante's a guy that's just going to react. I think, obviously, he's going to be a good contributor to it. Now, Derwin, I saw him at a camp in Carlsbad down in San Diego the other day, and I asked him, I'm like, hey, Jalen has said now he wants just Southern California. And so he turns to the camera and he goes, Jalen, come on, let's get this done. Like, just come out to the Chargers. Let's do this. Let's get this going. Derwin and Jalen have always talked about playing with each other before their careers were over. So this might be the best opportunity for them. Now, would Jim and Joe be willing to pay the whole tab? I don't think so. But yeah, going back to, but I wanted to throw that in there because I thought that was pretty funny that he said that. But no, the Chargers are really hoping that their secondary is going to take that next step, especially with Tarheeb. You can tell he really wants to put the pads on. There's been multiple times where the Chargers are kind of like, hey, slow it down a little bit. Like, don't be so aggressive. Hey, remember, we can't. This isn't the time for getting physical. So they're really excited about the young group of secondary. Again, it's a really young group. So they're really going to depend, again, like in the receiving room, they're really going to depend on a lot of these young guys to take that next step. But Dante Jackson, I think, is going to be a very good contributor for them, especially because of how long he's a veteran. And him and Derwin actually were in the same draft class. So they said that they have a friendship going back to that. So that was pretty interesting to see. But, yeah, no, this secondary group is young. They're aggressive. And the Chargers are hopeful that they're able to take that next step and continue what they had last year, which was obviously one of the better secondaries in the NFL.
Fernando, good stuff, my friend. Tell the folks where they can find all your good work.
Oh, I appreciate it. Yeah, no, at Real F Ramirez, I'm on X, Instagram, and I'm even on TikTok, but seems like my football stuff kind of sucks and nobody cares about. People care more about the wrestling content that I get, so that's in combat sports. So go figure that's what people want to see.
Fernando, good stuff, my friend. Enjoy the rest of your summer. We get back to the grind in about a month.
Thanks, Fernando.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you guys. Yeah, we're in earlier than everybody else because of the Hall of Fame game. But, yeah, no, definitely appreciate you guys, and have a great rest of your guys this summer. And stay cool out there. And I heard about how hot it is out there, so I hope all you guys stay cool.
I appreciate it, man. High of 102 today. So, yes, it is good.
I won't even tell you how it is out here.
Tell me, how is it out there?
Let me check. It is a high of 64 degrees.
Wow. Who would have thought that?
Go enjoy the weather, my friend.
Have a good one, guys.
Yep.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Enjoy the breeze.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Oh, but that would be nice.
Yeah.
Fernando Ramirez, and again, you're going to find this stuff at the Sporting Tribune. Make sure you go check him out. Good stuff there, Lance. And look, I thought they made more progress than I thought they would. And you take a look at their roster, especially on defense, they don't have a ton of marquee names there. They just played really good football last year. I do worry about their wide receivers on offense. You mentioned, Zion Johnson playing a new position at center. The left guard, Bradley Bozeman, is fine. So there are some questions there in a very tough conference. I think they're going to be one of these teams that will be fighting for a playoff spot to the end of the year. But look, I think they're a well-coached team. I think they're going to run the hell out of the football. I think Marion Hampton will eventually just be their bell cow, and Najee Harris will get some carries, but it won't be a 50-50 split. But they got a good football team, and they're going to be a tough out.
I would not bet against Jim Harbaugh This was one of those teams that I expected to make the playoffs simply because if you look at what he's done, John, when he takes over colleges or NFL programs, he knows how to flip the switch. And he set forth a plan, and they were able to implement it. And as Fernando pointed out, I'm with him in terms of the logic and the thinking. You've already established what you wanted last season. Now you add on top of that, even though there is some new personnel, as you mentioned, in the backfield, I'd be very surprised if the Chargers fall off a cliff. Are they going to win the AFC West? I wouldn't go so far, but I think they're going to be in the thick of things.
I agree, but would it shock you if they finished at 8-9?
No, of course not.
And like just missed
borderline.
The playoffs? Right.
No, it's a tough NFL, and he had seasons with the San Francisco 49ers where they were hovering around 500
right.
too.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess I'd be surprised if they completely disappear.
I agree with that.
And go in the opposite end of the spectrum. I think that
look, when you have a really good coach and a really good quarterback, you're going to be pretty good.
Well, and I think they've got an underrated defense, as we talked about with Fernando, because you pointed out, you prefaced your comments by saying if you played the paper test, if you didn't watch Chargers football and I just showed you the depth chart, you'd be unimpressed with all of these names outside of Khalil Mack and Derwin James, who are household commodities. But I think if you look at what they were able to get out of the group and the rotation, which is to me what they're going to do with this group of defensive linemen, they were able to stay in the hunt, and if some of the key guys in the middle of the defense didn't get hurt, you could argue they could have been even more impressive. So
Yep.
I would not dismiss the caliber of this defense. They were one of the top teams against the pass. They were the number one scoring defense. We talked about, okay, the sacks don't jump off the page, but Thule, who led the team in sacks, is back. So the only guy that you're really worried about is Joey Bosa, but Bosa has not been the art of durability throughout the course of his career. So I'm not poo-pooing on his absence, but I think they've experienced a lot of life without him, John.
I agree with that.
That it's not going to be earth-shattering when they can't turn to him. So overall, I think this is an easy team to overlook, but I think they're going to be very much in the hunt next season.
No, I'm with you. I think that makes a lot of sense. They're going to be a tough out. And again, and guys, we'll open up the phone lines here. We'll take your calls at 201-939-4513. And now we've had, a couple shows here where we've reviewed a couple different teams, the Chiefs and the Chargers. And Fernando spoke about this. Dude, the AFC is just so loaded. The Bills are going to be awesome. Josh Allen. The Ravens are going to be awesome. Lamar Jackson. The Chiefs are going to be awesome. Patrick Mahomes. So I hate to say I'm going to pencil all three of those teams in playoff spots, but I would be pretty fall off my chair surprised if all three of those teams were in the playoffs, right? And then you look at the rest of the teams that made it last year. The AFC South is still a pretty weak division. I think maybe the Jaguars will be a little bit better, but I don't think they're playoff ready yet. The Texans, I think you feel pretty good about them being the best team in that division. So that would be whoever comes out of the South is your fourth team. So then you got 3 spots left, right? And for the rest of your spots, you have the Dolphins with Tua and Mike McDaniel, who have consistently, if he's healthy, been around 500 or better. You have the Steelers, who we know Mike Tomlin's record.
Yep.
You have Joe Burrow and the Bengals. You know how well they've played. Then you have the Chargers, who we just talked about. And then you have the Broncos, who have one of the best defenses in football, one of the best offensive lines in football, and a young quarterback with a bunch of pretty good weapons outside. So you're looking at 5 or 6 teams that we all think are pretty good. That's 5 that I mentioned, competing for just 3 playoff spots. And there's going to be good. And by the way, that's not even accounting for a surprise team, which we always have every year. A team that comes out of nowhere ends up being really good. So it is going to be really challenging to get into the playoffs in the AFC. And I don't think 9 wins are going to do it, Lance. Last year, the Bengals won 9. They didn't make it. The Broncos just got in with 10. So I think it's going to take, and so did the Steelers, just got in with 10. It's going to take 10 wins to get into the playoffs in the AFC.
Well, and remember, you only play 6 games within the division, so you still have 11 to toy with outside of the division. Even though we say they're going to beat each other up, you could beat each other up and still get to 10 wins.
13 games in the conference, though.
No, 100%.
Right.
But I still think you can manage. I mean, to me, it's not necessarily the 10 wins coming from the conference. It's just the 10 wins overall.
Oh, it's hard. Yeah.
No, it's going to be a grind, but I would say Jacksonville's offense should take a boost with Liam Cohen now orchestrating that.
And by the way, the Chargers play in the NFC East, which is very tough, top to bottom, too. So that's going to make it even tougher.
In terms of the divisions out of conference that they're going to have. I mean, listen, this is nothing new for the AFC. They understand what they're up against. This conference hasn't all of a sudden, come out of nowhere. It's been deep for the last few years, and there's always, once again, a few teams that rise to the occasion. And I'd keep eyes on Jacksonville because I think Liam Cohen is going to sprinkle in some nuance with that offense based on what he did in Tampa Bay with their scheme and helped revitalize Baker Mayfield's career. And then the other team that you should keep close tabs on is the Raiders with Pete Carroll now in the fold, because he's been just as good as Harbaugh in turning around programs.
And a new quarterback, too, with Geno Smith.
Correct. So the Raiders, that's going to be a thorn in the side of the other three teams, right, in the West. Yeah. And Jacksonville, may not have as overwhelming of a path, but they could beat up enough teams that maybe somebody in another division all of a sudden drops off.
And by the way, the Colts are very talented. They just need to figure out the quarterback spot.
They need to have durability there. It depends on Anthony Richardson, Daniel Jones. The problem is they each have the same issue. Can they stay healthy? So it really doesn't matter who we're talking about. They both have upside and potential, but can you tell me that one of them is going to play, 13, 14 games? It's a roll of the dice, flip of the coin at this stage.
All right, let's get to the phones at 201-939-4513. Jared in Long Island will lead us off today. Hey, Jared, how are you?
Hey, I'm good. How are you guys?
We're doing well, man. How are you?
Good. I've been watching for a couple of years now. I always wanted to call in. It's my first time calling in.
No, I appreciate that, Jared.
So I went to the, I don't know if you guys heard, but I went to the Fanatics Fest over the weekend. I went on Saturday. And
it seemed like it was quite the scene.
What'd you say?
It seemed like it was quite the scene.
Yeah, it was a pretty crazy day. They had so many people there. It was a lot of fun. But I went to go see Odell because he is my favorite Giant of all time, even though, it didn't work out like how we wanted it to. But, he gave me a lot of memories as a kid.
Sure.
And, I got my jersey signed by him. And would you guys be opposed to signing him maybe to like a 1-year deal to mentor, maybe like Malik, show him how to do things and not, just mentor him?
Jared, I got a question for you. Do you want Malik Neighbors to have a up and down early part of his career the way Odell Beckham Jr. did? In terms of how he handled everything?
That's how we can show him not to be like him,
Well, Jared, I think the question would be, do you think Odell is self-aware to the point where he knows he could have handled things better here? Does he think everything was cool?
Yeah, probably.
You know what I'm saying?
Well, the other way that you have to look at it is it worth eating up a roster spot for a mentor?
Yeah, Jared, I'll be honest with you.
Yeah,
and even putting my jokes aside, can he run anymore?
He's not the same player.
I just don't know how much burst he has left. You know what I mean?
I don't know. He may retire this offseason, but I feel like he's either going to retire or maybe just sign like a 1-day contract to retire with us,
Well, he could do that regardless of whether or not there's a spot. It sounds like, I don't want to put words in your mouth, Jared, you're very sentimental over Odell, and I completely understand that. I just think from a football standpoint, and I actually did see his comments. He said something about he'd give up his Rams Super Bowl ring to finish his career with the Giants. So he's probably a little sentimental too, but I think where the Giants are at this point, if you're going to, even if you keep, let's say, 6 wide receivers, and you want one of them to be an established veteran, I need to believe that, God forbid, Neighbors, Slayton, or Robinson gets hurt, that I can put that guy on the field and he's going to be productive. And at this stage in his career, I don't know if you're going to get a lot of bang for the buck, even if the buck is, very small at this point in terms of the financial investment. I think the Giants, where they are as a franchise, are better off developing a younger player and giving that younger player more of a shot than bringing in somebody that maybe can pull at the heartstrings of the fan base.
Well, and Jared, the other thing I'll say too is that, does he want to be here the whole time, right? Like, if you get a commitment from him that he's going to show up day one of training camp and he's actually going to do stuff and he's going to, be fully engaged, then, maybe we can have that conversation. But I think what we've seen from him over the past couple of years is that he has very little interest of being around in the summer. He has very little interest in, he kind of wants to show up mid-season and then kind of do his thing. So I don't know what his thoughts would be on that either, but I think that's something else you would have to work out with him ahead of time as well.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just kind of, it's like younger me coming out.
No, I get it, man.
After 11 years, it's just, I don't know. It's a very nostalgic moment meeting him, just seeing him on TV this whole time. Sure. Now finally meeting him.
Jared, I got a question for you real quick. I wrote Jared. No, Jared, real quick. I have a question. What color was Beckham's hair at this time of year?
Okay, so he had like the waves going on. He had like the low cut, and it wasn't dyed like he used to.
Okay,
honestly, he looked completely different from the Giants days, but you could still tell it was him.
Very good, Jared. Good stuff, man. And look, I appreciate the call. Awesome stuff. And look, we know there are a lot of Odell fans out there, and it would be cool to have him back and put on the jersey and retire a Giant, all that stuff. You just have to figure out what that would look like. What are his goals at this point? Does he want to come back and play? Does he want to just come back and retire? What does he want out of this? What do the Giants want out of that? Do you want to take snaps away from Jalen Hyatt to give to Odell Beckham Jr., who's over 30 years old? I don't know if that's what you want, right? So that's how I would look at it myself personally.
Well, I mean, even if you just play the numbers game, and this gets back to my point, we want to assume they're going to keep 6 wide receivers? You want to go in that direction?
I mean, and that's a fairly big assumption.
Okay, so maybe they keep 5, but let's go with 6 because we don't know how the injuries are going to play out. All right, so we know Neighbors, Sladen, and Robinson are penned in, and I think Hyatt looks very good. Okay, so that's 4 of the 6 right there.
Amir Smith-Marsette's your kickoff and punt
correct,
returner.
So he's going to count within that number.
Yeah.
So now you got Bryce Ford-Whedon. You've got Zach Pascal, who's a veteran himself, and then we'll see what happens with little Jordan Humphrey.
Who's also a veteran. Yeah.
Does he play tight end? Does he play wide receiver? But the bottom line is we just named 3 options, one of which was already within the trenches of the franchise, and I'm talking about Ford-Whedon, who's a younger guy. Even if you want to get past the hurdle of sentimental value, you think he could be somewhat productive, does that still surpass one of these 3 guys? I don't see it.
Not to mention the fact that Brian Dable was raving about the undrafted free agent wide receiver class last week.
Yep.
That you
and
might
I didn't
have
even get into those guys.
If one of those guys has a monster summer, do you have to figure out a way to sneak him onto the roster so you don't lose him? If he has a monster preseason games, you know what I mean? Something to keep in mind. And let me just say this, and then I will get to the next 2 callers very quickly, because I think were we on live? Was it me and you that were on live as soon as the Beckham trade went final, or was that me and Dottino? That might have been me and Dottino.
Yeah, I don't recall. It's possible.
Back in 2019, I guess that was, right? That trade ended up being a grand slam for the Giants.
Yeah, especially what they did with the draft picks.
Grand slam.
Yeah.
I mean, since Odell Beckham left, Lance, he had one year where he had more than 45 catches. 1 year. He had 74 catches and 1,000 yards in his first season with the Browns. Now, I'm giving the fact that it's the Browns and their quarterback situation wasn't exactly stable there for while he was there. So, yes, some of that's out of Odell's control, and that's not his fault. But they got Dexter Lawrence out of that trade. Jabril Peppers when he was here was a good player.
Yep.
I'm trying to remember who they used the second draft pick on that they got.
I can look up the ins and outs of the trade, yeah.
Either way, even if you throw that away, the mere fact that you had a chance to draft Dexter Lawrence with the pick, and Odell's career just, after he broke his ankle with the Giants, right? He just never had that, even that last year with the Giants, when he had, 12 games, 77 catches, 1,000 yards. He was still missing that catch the slant, get to 1,000,000 miles per hour and go factor. And I never feel like that got all the way back with him.
It didn't.
It never came all the way back.
The injuries took a toll on him.
And it stinks. It's awful. It makes me depressed just thinking about it. But it turned out to be a really, really good trade for them. It really did. And I know there was a lot of Giant fans probably still be mad at me for saying that, but it ended up turning out really well.
Well, and that's why you have to wait, right? 3 or 4 years in terms of what you do with it. So O'Shane Ximenez was who they picked with the 95th pick.
That one did not
17th was Dexter Lawrence. But still, Dex and Peppers is enough of a return. And you're not going to get every asset to say what happened to Odell and the lack of durability / production, nowhere near what he did early in his career with the Giants. I still think you'd be pretty happy with what those 2 of the 3 did for the Giants defense.
I mean, if he ended up going back and having 1,400 yards years again, then you'd be like, all right, well, maybe the trade wasn't the best. That was not how it went that way. But, Odell, those 3 dynamite years from 2014 to 2016, never made a Pro Bowl after that. It's amazing how hot he came out of the chute, and then, unfortunately, the injury, and then, he tore his ACL a couple times since after that. Just
That's why you
It
can't
sucks.
crown guys after
Yep.
1 or 2 years. Long career that pans out.
Absolutely. All right, back to the phones. 201-939-4513. Earl in Denver is up next. Earl, what's going on?
Hey, nothing much. How are you guys?
We're good.
I know it sounds weird. You're like, Denver, what is this guy on? But born and raised a Giants fan, family from the East Coast.
Nice.
Had a great childhood. Last 13 years, man, been rough.
Hey, Earl, if you're in Denver, man, Giants are coming to your neighborhood this year. You got to get to that game, man.
Those people are crazy. I'll be at the bar, but I won't be at the stadium.
Are they nuts, the Broncos fans?
Oh, my goodness gracious. Those people will not let any opposing fan have a little bit of happiness.
Really? Interesting. Okay. I figure people
Yeah.
living in the mountains. I know you can do some recreational stuff out in Denver. That'll chill some people out a little bit. But okay, I got you.
It's the thin air that gets to them.
Yeah,
so,
it's the thin air. Yeah, I'm sure that's what it is.
But the reason why I called you guys was so my outlook for this season is I wanted to ask you if you think we're going to have any receivers besides Malik that are going to be over 1,000 yards, and if we're moving in the right direction with this receiving core, because I feel like we got guys like Wan'Dale Robinson who is either on fire or he's just the production isn't there, and with recent improvements to the O-line, got experienced quarterback and a rookie that he's to start by the end of the season. Do you think we're going to have that production level there? Do we have the quality, or are we still kind of don't have too many expectations for the season?
I don't think you're going to have two receivers with more than 1,000 yards. I'm curious. I'm looking this up right now. Hang with me here, Earl. The only teams that had multiple wide receivers with over 1,000 yards last year, I'm going through the list here. Were there none? Because T. Higgins was hurt, so he didn't get it. The Lions had Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jamison Williams, both with 1,000. Devontae Smith did not get to 1,000 last year, it doesn't look like. I think there was only one team, and again, this is just me literally looking at the league leaders at the position. Did DK Metcalf get 1,000 last year? No, he didn't, so the Seahawks did not have two. The Vikings, they did not have a second one. Yeah, so it looks like the only team that had 2,000-yard wide receivers last year, my quick look here, and Lance, please correct me if I'm wrong. It looks like it was, as I mentioned earlier, the Lions. So I don't think you're going to get two giant receivers with 1,000 yards this year. I think you're going to get 1,000 easily with Malik. And then I think you'll probably have Slayton. He'll get his usual, 700 to 800 yards receiving, somewhere in that area. And then you'll have Hyatt and Robinson, and then you're going to play a bunch of different tight ends. I think they're going to throw the running backs a lot this year. I think the rest will be kind of split out pretty evenly between the rest of the group. But look, it's going to be a lot of Malik Neighbors. He's going to get a ton of targets. He's going to be a huge focus of this passing attack. And you know what? That's not a bad thing. A lot of other teams operate that way too.
And not even the Bengals pulled off two 1,000-yard receivers.
No.
With T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. Higgins was in the 900s, but he failed to get to 1,000.
Only played in 12 games, so.
But, I mean, even with the way Joe Burrow throws, you'd figure even in 12 games they had a legitimate shot. So I think that should answer your question, Earl. If a team like the Bengals couldn't even do it, I think it'd be hard-pressed for the Giants to accomplish that.
Niners were close. Juwan Jennings got to 975, and Kittle had 1,100. So that was close.
But when you look at the Steelers, even with Russell Wilson, it was George Pickens who finished with 900. They didn't even have one 1,000-yard receiver. And I'm not saying it's identical, but now I'm looking at who's at the controls and how they may want to emphasize the run game a little bit more, given they have the personnel and the diversity there. I'd be very, very surprised if the Giants get a pair of 1,000-yard receivers. I think the only way that you get to that point is if Wilson just is clicking with Darius Slayton with the deep ball, and he has a bomb every game. You would need that. Or Wan'Dale Robinson takes his yardage per catch after the run to new heights.
Or
those are the types of things that you need. Or Hyatt,
or Hyatt explodes with the same way with the deep passes like Slayton.
But
that's it.
I'm talking about you're not going to rely on just a splash play here or there. You're going to need it consistently game in and game out, and I just don't see that coming to fruition.
Yeah, yes, sir. And then one other question, if I am allowed for the time.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Okay. So, speaking about Jalen Hyatt, I'm a big SEC football guy. I was so pumped up when we drafted him. Then obviously not enough production, got hurt, and putting on 15 to 20 pounds of muscle in the offseason, having Russell Wilson talk him up. Do you think we got to break through at least one game to get some nice numbers out of him this year?
I think you got a chance, Earl. I really do, and appreciate the call. Good stuff. Thanks for calling in from Denver, and enjoy the game out there this year, even though you might not get out to the stadium. But look, he's got a shot. And it's not, and I will emphasize this, it's not just because he had a big spring. I've seen a lot of receivers have big springs, then do nothing in the summer and the fall. Don't take much or of anything out of what happens in spring practices without pads. It's the fact that he looks like a different player with the added weight. And that's a big deal. Look, we talked about that when they drafted him, Lance. We had a long conversation about him being 170 pounds, not being able to handle press. So you have the added weight, which makes him physically a different player. They're moving him around more and using him in the slot more. So that's usage change, plus the added weight, plus it's his third year. And on top of that, he had a good spring. So you have all four of those factors working together, which I think it gives you a chance to have a breakout. Now, you can screen one more, Johnny Mac. I don't know how much playing time he's going to get, and that's really the trick here.
That's the wild card.
Which we don't know what that's going to look like, but they will give him a chance to earn snaps. So I think there's a shot at it, but I think the thing that might be holding back the most is the playing time. But again, we got to see him now repeat this performance in the spring when he's facing live opponents, wearing pads, and real game competitive situations.
Well, the other thing that I would add is Russell Wilson also seems to be very high on him.
That's a good point.
He has talked a lot about Hyatt, and it has been unsolicited. During press conferences where they'll ask him about the weapons, he highlights Hyatt. So
Hyatt told me a story. Russell called him the day he signed. He didn't even know his number. He just picked up the rando number. So he's, you're right. To your point, I just wanted to emphasize that. He's very excited to throw the ball down.
So the reason why I bring that up is because it's playing time, but it's also targets, John, right? Those things go hand in hand. You can get on the field. Does the quarterback have confidence that he's going to feed you the ball? So that bodes very well. And
that goes back to the strong spring with his connection with Wilson, too.
And I think Russ also has a track record of spreading the wealth. You know, whether you look at Seattle, he does certainly lean on a guy, but I don't look at Russell Wilson as a guy that plays one favorite and he's going to force feed the ball. But here's the other thing.
Baldwin and Golden Tate shared it. Lockett and DK Metcalf shared it. They all shared it.
Denver, where they didn't necessarily have the same caliber of weapons, but if you look back at that season, I know that wasn't his best. He's not going to give one guy an overwhelming amount of targets.
Sutton and Judy both got some action.
But there are running backs within this offense that he could lean on too.
Sure.
And the reason why I'm bringing that up is we're talking about Hyatt, at least right now, based on the pecking order, being the fourth wide receiver. Even if he gets on the field, does Russell Wilson build a rapport with a Tyrone Tracy or somebody? Does that eat into the potential opportunities? I know they're going to run different routes because you're going to have Hyatt more of a deep threat. But, you know, all of these things, they add up over the course of a season. So you could get some of the flashes, but if we're talking about breakout campaign, John, in order to have a breakout campaign, you've got to do it game in and game out. You can't just say every other game or every 2 or 3 games you're going to throw it deep to him. So I don't know if, I guess to use the baseball language, I don't know if there's going to be enough at-bats.
Yeah, you might not.
And that could be the one thing, despite the promise, that holds Jalen Hyatt back a little bit.
I think you see signs that it's possible. Now we have to see if it can happen. I think that's kind of where we're at. All right, let's go to Ryan in Illinois. Ryan, what's going on?
Hey there, guys. How are we doing today?
We're great.
Doing all right. What's happening? What's on your mind?
I was going to make a couple points, and the first, I think that everyone's over the moon for the defensive line and what it can do just collaboratively. But I want to highlight that the offense is actually probably going to help the most in just making sure that drives start and don't immediately end and get the defense back on the field. I think it's so important to keep those guys fresh, and just having a stable offense under Russell Wilson, I think will do wonders for the pass rush because they might actually have a lead for once to work with.
Ryan, look, and I think you hit it there. Look, luckily they're going to have waves of guys, so even if there's a couple 3 and outs, I think you can keep the defense fresh because you have multiple edges and multiple defensive linemen to move in and out. But the second point you made, I think, is huge. Can the offense get this defense some leads, right, to actually let them rush the passer? So that, to me, is essential. I'm with you on that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to bring up the snap count, actually, John. I mean, they had maybe not as much depth, but I think they had enough of a rotation, and they specifically have it this year that, you know, we're not talking about, what was it? We talked about this during even Spag's tenure, where there would be years where he'd be forced to just play JPP 90-some-odd% of the
Olivia
snaps.
Vernon had some 90% of the snap years, too.
I don't think Shane Bowen's going to go down that road.
Last year, Burns was around 79, and Thibodeau is around 75.
Okay, but that's doable.
And those are
that's digestible.
Those are the two highest guys on the defensive front.
I can live with that.
And those might even go down now because you have Golston and Carter here.
Yeah. So getting back to the caller's point, I understand on the surface, yes, if the offense sustains drives, they score more points, that should help the defense. But it was also not necessarily because guys were getting worn down because they were playing too much. They were rotating. I mean, the issue, and not to relive last season, but they could not stop the run. That was their biggest issue, and that's why opposing teams stayed on the field time and time again. So whether you're having a disparity between your offense and their offense because of number of plays, to me it still goes down to, can you stop the run on the early downs? And if you could do that, we should not have to sit here and have conversations. Well, if Russell Wilson and company ate up 5 more minutes in time of possession, the defense would be in much better position. That's my point, at least.
This is true. My second thing, if I may.
Yeah.
There's been some pushback against some young players that I think are really just trying to find their stride, both John Michael Schmitz and Deonte Banks. I feel like both are in a similar situation where they've seen some progression and then taking some bad steps backwards. And I just think that people need to not give up on them and recognize that the positions that they're at, Schmitz, because he's undersized, he's got to grow into a bigger body, and that's just how it is. You know, you're going to struggle against big nose tackles and, 3 techniques that are just overpowering to you. So you just got to grow into that. And then Deonte Banks, he's getting back to the press man stuff this year. So I really think that that's going to help him when he was kind of out of his sorts last season, playing a lot of zone. I think it just wasn't his cup of tea. So hopefully we can get back to press man, and both those 2 players will take some steps forward. Thanks, guys.
I appreciate the call. And look, I think based on what I heard from the players when we did our media day interviews, I feel like they are going to get more of that back in. And look, Lance, just overall, this is a huge year for the 2023 draft class. Look, we talked about Hyatt already. He brought up Banks and Schmitz. You become a good football team because your draft class is developed into really good players. And he's 100% right. After 2 years, you should not be giving up on anyone. But 3 years? I'm not saying you start giving up on guys, but if you don't see something from guys after 3 years, or they start giving you a high level of play, it becomes less likely that they start clicking later. I think all the guys we've talked about, Banks, Schmitz, and Hyatt, have the talent and ability to be good football players and good starting football players. Now we just got to see it.
Year 3 is a critical year for really any player in the National Football League, because you figure, okay, year 1's going to be a little bit interrupted. You went through the combine. You didn't have a typical offseason. Year 2, okay, you have some normalcy. And year 3, you expect, okay, now you put it all together. So I don't really think there's much of a difference between those 3 players that you mentioned. As the caller pointed out, maybe the approach in terms of the schematics helps Deonte Banks. I think JSM needs to stay healthy. You know, that's a big part of showcasing consistency, especially on the offensive line.
JMS.
Can he hold up? Yeah, I'm sorry. I was
You're going Jackson Smith and Jigba.
Yes, that's who I was perhaps thinking about.
Who we
These
also
acronyms get interchanged.
Who we also mentioned earlier in the show.
Yes, when we were thinking about the Seattle days and so forth. So, but getting back to the point at hand, durability, I think, is the one thing that comes to mind, and also stability with respect to the guys playing on the left and the right of him, too.
Yeah.
Because if you're not in the lineup evenly, then you're also not building the chemistry that is needed. The other thing, speaking of playing time, I brought up the snap counts from last season just to solidify what we were talking about. So Burns was at 79%. And then as I look at, really, I'm going to say the linebackers, the defensive linemen, I mean, nobody else, John, was in that vicinity.
Yeah, the problem is that there's so many injuries.
Of course, there were, and that's going to impact it.
Out, yeah.
Sure, but I would say even if you have full health for the most part out of your main guys, based on what they drafted, I don't think there's a need for Bowen to entertain playing a guy 80 to 85% of the snaps.
I looked it up just for fun. We have a cover 3 question coming up in a couple weeks that I answered about this. The Eagles last year. Oh, boy, I don't have it in front of me. I don't think they had anyone over. I think Josh Sweat was at like 67%. Nolan Smith is at like 59%, and nobody else on the front was higher than that. So there are ways to spread this out, and that's not a bad thing.
But I would say you don't even need to use last season as a poster child. The Eagles historically have been like that.
And if you go, by the way, Giants Media Pass podcast, the Brian Burns interviews on there when we did our FAN show the other night, and he talked about how, look, yeah, that helps you. Like, if I'm only playing 60% of the snaps, I'm going to have more juice in quarter number 4. All right, let's wrap things up. We didn't do a lot of calls recently. I want to make sure we got a couple in today. We're going to Columbia, Maryland, and say hello to Ratcliffe. Ratcliffe, do you have Len somewhere in your area? Ratcliffe,
hey guys,
going once.
how's it going?
What's up, man? How are you?
Hey, I'm good. How are you?
What do you got?
Hey, so I've been listening for a couple of years. This is my first time calling, so I'm a little excited about that.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, we're excited to have you, Ratcliffe. What do you got?
So I wanted to know, as far as the preseason goes, now we know the preseason is the preseason, but just what are some things you guys are looking for during those games, as far as the team goes or certain players?
Good question. One, I think, is stay healthy is first and foremost. Don't get hurt in these games. That's the most important thing. How does the offensive line look playing together? Do they look like they have some chemistry? They're not allowing a lot of free runners. They have their protections in line, especially when the starters are out there together. I think that's important. Obviously, this year you're going to see how Jackson Dart plays. Now, it doesn't mean a whole lot because teams are playing simplified defenses. He's going to be playing against backups probably more often than not. So don't take too much out of it, but it'll certainly be excited to see how you'll be able to see how overwhelmed he is. If he's overwhelmed, you'll be able to tell. If he's not overwhelmed, you'll be able to see that too. And I think that'll be important. Right. Are you physical early in these games against the run when teams are trying to run the ball against you with these starters? That's an issue we've had with the Giants here is the top of the run. I look for the physicality part of things just because you don't see that in practice because you're not tackling to the ground and stuff. So do you see the Giants being a physical football team and winning on the line of scrimmage just because you don't see that in the practice environment, but you can see it in games? So that, along with the young guys and how they're playing, specifically Jackson Dart, will be the stuff, Lance, that I'll be keeping an eye on in those preseason games.
Yeah, the preseason's about really individuals to me more so than anything from a team component.
Agreed.
I'll give you an example. I forget the year, maybe 2-3 years ago, Giants starting offense on the field. They marched down the field against Carolina. And everybody was talking about, wow, this offense is going to be ridiculous, okay? Mm-hmm. And then look at what happened. So, once again, this is not to be a Debbie Downer. It's just that's the realistic way you have to look at preseason games. You can't take so much away from production because who's playing on the opposing team? How long are the starters in? I would say of all of the young guys, it's really about Jackson Dart. When he gets in, how does he look? How does he command the offense? What type of decisions does he make? And that's not necessarily going to be the end-all, be-all to determine his outlook, but it's about individual players, how active they look. Are they picking up what the defense is calling them to do? Do they look comfortable? Are they running all around the place and slipping and sliding as if they're on ice? I mean, those are the types of things that I look at more so than taking away, okay, wow, the defense looked great in stopping the run. Yeah, but the opposing team didn't really play a lot of their top guys, and they were barely in for the first quarter, and all of a sudden week 1 is a rude awakening because now you see the varsity team as opposed to you were seeing sprinkling in of the JV and the varsity. So it's about individual players on an island, which is not what really football's about, but I think that's your biggest takeaway from the preseason.
Guys. And I appreciate it, guys. That's all I had.
No, thank you for calling in, man. We appreciate it. A lot of calls from all across the country today. And guys, I'm sorry we didn't take more. We'll try to take more the rest of the week.
And we had 2, I believe, that called in for the first time.
Yeah, I know.
Who had been listening for a long time, so we certainly appreciate that. Before you close up shop, I brought up the Eagles' defensive snaps from last season.
And get your headset on, Pearson. You're up next
in terms of your point about the rotation. And once again, you could go back historically, but just give you an idea. Jalen Carter played 79% of the snaps.
That's right. The edge guys, Carter I did not include when I did my story. I was talking about the edge guys.
And then really anyone higher, you got to go to the linebackers. Zach Bond, for example. Yeah. He's not an edge guy. He's middle. So I'm not even going to throw him in.
Sweat was 67%, right?
Was at 82%. Let's see. Josh Sweat, as I go through the defensive end, Sweat was at 59%.
So even lower than I remembered.
So, and Nolan Smith was at 52%.
Yeah. See?
Yeah. That's where you want to be, ideally. So that's why, going back to the caller we had earlier.
And where was Jordan Davis, out of curiosity?
Jordan Davis was at 37%. You wonder why they look so good in the fourth quarter.
And how about Milton Williams?
Milton Williams, 48%.
He just got $25 million a year.
Well, that's why guys want to play for Philly. Not only does it get your money, it preserves your career by going there. So you've got a defensive coordinator, clearly, that has been extremely experienced, Vic Fangio, and he knows what it takes to compete and win at the highest level. And when you have a defense that's in good hands, these coaches, they're going to make sure that they don't override these players. So I'm not surprised. I think it's an organizational philosophy, but I also think they've brought in some veteran defensive coordinators that understand that's how you get through the journey of a very, very lengthy season.
All right, let's bring in Pearson Butler here. But first, I should promote Giants Huddle Podcast. Our running back episode is up there. Go check it out on YouTube. We have the running back interviews together. Then we also have Tyrone Tracy separate on the YouTube channel. They're all together on the podcast platforms. Giants Huddle Podcast, Giants app, Giants.com/podcast, YouTube channel on the Giants. Check it out. It's fantastic. It's good. You'll enjoy it. Check that out. All right, Pearson.
Yes.
Celtics, how do you feel about them systematically dismantling your championship team?
Not systematically dismantling.
Well, it's the start of the systematic.
They are financially getting themselves in a better spot.
So
That's
now
what I think.
So they're going to take the model of the Red Sox in terms of how they handle their expensive players.
Well, they're just going to – Drew Holiday's the best. I will always be thankful to him. He helped bring a championship to Boston. But – he is 9 years older than this Anthony Simons guy.
Yes.
Who I'm seeing has averaged like 20 and 5 over the last 2 seasons.
Very, very, very good 3-point shooter. His 2-point shooting is not the best.
Yes.
But they're not going to need him to take twos. Not in that offense. So.
And I don't know about his defense. It's probably not as good as Drew Holiday. So.
Well, no. Drew Holiday's an all-defensive.
But I think there's
player.
upside to him. And 2 second-round picks, too. So maybe you can use those for something. And, next year might be weird because Tatum's not going to be in most of the year. But if you get yourself in a financially good spot, the year after could be very scary.
And apparently the Bulls are trying to be a little active in the offseason this year, Lance. They try to maybe sign. I read today maybe sign and trade for Kuminga. Might be in the mix there.
We'll see. I mean, listen, I think they got a nice nucleus together. They just, they need that difference maker of a player. I don't know if I would say Kuminga is the guy, but
Giddey and Kobe White have turned out to be a nice little duo.
So I'm very pleased from that standpoint, and they'll have another draft, so we'll see where that takes them in the rotation.
Where are they picking the Bulls this year?
That's a good question. I have been so focused on football the last few days. I'm now going to turn. I mean, I know the draft is tomorrow. And then Thursday, see what the NBA draft order is.
Very much unlike the NFL draft. I have not really dug into the NBA draft at all. I can name Cooper Flagg.
Well, it's now 2 days too.
Dylan Harper. I know him. I don't know many other guys beyond that.
12th.
12th.
Chicago.
That's a good pick.
Yeah. So they can walk away with a quality player. And San Antonio is, I think, the team to watch. They've got a pair of top 15 picks.
Yeah.
I don't trade away anything.
I don't think they're moving number 2 based on what I'm hearing.
No, and they shouldn't.
Yeah.
Because I think based on how that team is constructed, and I thought they would have perhaps been a little bit more aggressive in getting Kevin Durant, considering he was on the wish list, but it didn't fall through.
No.
So they now can bring in 2 young guys.
Absolutely. All right, guys, thanks for being with us on Big Blue Kickoff Live, presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the Giants. Coming from our podcast studio, presented by Hackensack Meridian Health, keep getting better. I mentioned the Giants Huddle Podcast, folks. Go check that out. Also, if you want to become a Giants season ticket member, go to Giants.com/tickets. You can find out all the great member benefits that we have. It's a great home schedule this year. It might be, I don't want to be hyperbolic here. It might be the only time you get to see Patrick Mahomes play in this building for the rest of his career. It's going to be 8 years. A lot of things can happen in 8 years, folks. A lot of things. I would not bet on him being out of the league in 8 years, but you never know. So you could see him here. You could see Justin Herbert here again. Who knows when you're going to see Justin Herbert again and how good he's going to be when he comes back. So a lot of good players coming in. Make sure you go check that out. And, of course, you can find all of our content not only on the Giants YouTube channel, but also on Giants TV, which is on all of your smart TVs and on-demand and direct-to-Big Blue fans, Apple TV, Roku, Amazon Fire TV, all that good stuff, Giants mobile app. Check out all of our content. Lance, good stuff, my friend. Always
Absolutely.
a pleasure.
Yeah, sounds good.
For Lance Medow, I am John Schmeelk. Tomorrow, Pierce, on the top of your head, do you know which team we're doing tomorrow? Saints, I believe. Saints. It'll be me and Datino. I got to find the Saints guy in the next 6 hours, which should be fun. We'll have that tomorrow, and then we'll continue to go through the players. We are dark again the first 2 weeks of July. Then we come back, and we're going to basically do 2 a day for our season wrap-up, and then we'll get back. We'll squeeze in your calls, too, and then training camp starts on the 23rd, so the 21st is a Monday. We'll kind of begin our training camp work here, right here on Big Blue Kickoff Live. For Lance Medow, I'm John Schmeelk. We'll see you next time, everybody.